She thought her birthday was finally going to change her life. Instead, it became the day her own brother tried to erase her future. It started with a gift worth $100,000 and ended with a slap, a locked door, and a desperate chase to the bank. But the money was never the real prize. Before she could even cash the check, someone had already deposited it using her identity. The bank manager looked at his computer screen, then slowly locked his office door. His face turned pale. "Don't leave this building," he whispered. "Call the police. Right now." What investigators uncovered next wasn't just financial fraud. It revealed years of lies, stolen identities, secret bank accounts, forged documents, and a family manipulated from the inside by someone everyone trusted. The person responsible wasn't a stranger. He was her own brother. And before this nightmare was over, she would have to choose between protecting her family or finally exposing the truth that could destroy it forever. The celebration had barely begun. Family members filled the house with laughter, birthday wishes, and the sound of clinking glasses. No one noticed the quiet tension hiding behind a few forced smiles. At the center of it all was Emily Carter, celebrating her 30th birthday. Her grandfather, Richard Carter, slowly walked toward her carrying a sealed cream-colored envelope. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he placed it into hers. "It's time you finally chased your own dream," he said with a warm smile. Emily carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a certified check for $100,000. For a moment, the world around her disappeared. The restoration studio she had dreamed about for years suddenly felt possible. Tears gathered in her eyes as she hugged her grandfather. Across the room, however, someone wasn't celebrating. Her older brother Ethan watched every second in complete silence. His smile never reached his eyes. While everyone applauded the birthday surprise, Ethan quietly slipped away from the living room. Emily never noticed. She was still staring at the check, completely unaware that someone else had already decided it didn't belong to her. As the guests returned to talking, Emily excused herself, wanting a quiet moment to thank her grandfather privately. She walked toward the hallway, still holding the envelope tightly. Behind her, soft footsteps followed. She didn't hear them. The paper inside the envelope felt unusually stiff in her hands. The hallway suddenly became much quieter than the crowded living room. Somewhere behind her, a door slowly clicked shut. Emily believed the birthday gift had just changed her future. She had no idea it was about to begin the worst day of her life. A few seconds later, her own brother would lock the door behind them and demand the gift that was never meant to be his. Emily stepped into the quiet study, hoping for a moment alone to collect herself. The cheerful sounds of the birthday party faded behind the closed hallway. She looked down at the certified check again. $100,000. It still didn't feel real. She imagined the old brick workshop she had dreamed of restoring, the smell of fresh paint, the antique furniture she loved bringing back to life, and finally building something that belonged to her. A gentle smile crossed her face. Then, the study door slammed shut. Emily spun around. Her older brother Ethan stood between her and the exit. Without saying a word, he turned the lock. The sharp click echoed through the room. His expression was completely different from the one he had worn downstairs. There was no warmth, no celebration, only desperation. He slowly held out his hand. "Give me the check." Emily blinked in disbelief. "What?" "The check," he repeated. "Hand it over." She laughed nervously, convinced he was making a terrible joke. "Grandpa gave this to me." Ethan took another step. "I'm not asking again." Something in his voice made her heartbeat quicken. She had known her brother her entire life, but she had never seen his eyes look like this. Not angry, terrified, as if losing that envelope would destroy everything he had been hiding. Emily instinctively pulled the envelope closer to her chest. "No." For a brief second, neither of them moved. The silence became unbearable. Then Ethan raised his hand. His palm struck her face with enough force to send her stumbling against the desk. The envelope nearly slipped from her fingers. Her cheek burned instantly. She stared at him in complete shock. The pain wasn't what hurt most. It was realizing her own brother had just hit her over a gift that wasn't his. Ethan grabbed her wrist tightly. His breathing became uneven. His eyes never left the envelope. "You don't understand," he whispered. "I have to fix this before it's too late." Emily noticed sweat running down Ethan's forehead. His hands were shaking. He wasn't acting out of simple jealousy. He looked like a man trying to stop a secret from being exposed. Impact line. In that moment, Emily realized the birthday gift wasn't creating a family argument. It was uncovering a nightmare that had already begun. Then Ethan whispered 5 chilling words. "You have no idea what's already happened." Emily's mind raced. The sting on her cheek barely registered anymore. She twisted her wrist with all the strength she had and shoved Ethan backward just enough to break free. He reached for the envelope again, but she was already moving. Emily unlocked the study door and sprinted into the hallway. The birthday party continued only a few rooms away. Laughter, music, conversations. No one realized a family was falling apart behind a closed door. She didn't stop to explain. She didn't stop to cry. Clutching the envelope tightly against her chest, she rushed out the front door and climbed into her car. As she drove away, she glanced in the rearview mirror. Ethan had run outside. He stood in the driveway watching her leave. But he didn't chase her. He simply stared, as if he already knew something she didn't. That look stayed with her the entire drive. Instead of going home, Emily drove straight to the nearest branch of the bank that had issued the certified check. The automatic doors slid open. The cool air inside felt strangely comforting after the chaos she'd escaped. Trying to remain calm, she approached the customer service desk. "I'd like to verify this certified check before depositing it." The employee smiled politely and escorted her into a private office. A senior branch manager introduced himself and carefully examined the check. Everything appeared normal, until he entered the check number into the bank's system. His fingers suddenly stopped moving. His expression changed. He looked at the computer screen, then at Emily, then back at the screen again. Without saying a word, he quietly stood up and locked the office door. Emily felt her heartbeat pounding in her ears. "Is something wrong?" she asked. The manager swallowed hard. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Ms. Carter, I need you to stay here. And whatever you do, don't leave this building." Emily's stomach tightened. "Why?" The manager slowly turned the monitor toward her. "I believe someone has already tried to cash this check." Emily stared at the screen in disbelief. That was impossible. The envelope had been in her hands for less than an hour. So, how could the bank's system show that the same check had already been deposited? The manager immediately called the bank's fraud department while quietly asking another employee to notify security. Emily sat frozen in her chair, still gripping the envelope. For the first time that day, she wasn't afraid of losing the money. She was afraid someone had stolen far more than that. The manager's hands trembled as he printed the transaction record. A red fraud warning flashed across the computer screen. Emily could hear the printer humming, each page revealing a mystery she wasn't prepared to face. This was no longer about a birthday gift. Someone had stolen her identity before she even knew she had something worth stealing. Then the manager revealed one final detail. The account that received the money had been opened under Emily's own name. Emily couldn't tear her eyes away from the computer screen. There it was, an active bank account bearing her full name. Yet she had never opened an account with this bank. The branch manager slowly rotated the monitor toward her. His expression had lost every trace of professional calm. "This account wasn't created today," he said carefully. "According to our records, it was opened several weeks ago using identification that matches yours." Emily felt the room grow smaller. Her driver's license, her social security number, even her previous home address had been used during the application process. Someone hadn't stolen today's birthday gift. Someone had been preparing for this moment long before her birthday ever arrived. The manager immediately contacted the bank's fraud department, requesting that every transaction connected to the account be frozen until investigators could review it. Only then did he quietly ask another employee to notify the police. Emily sat motionless. The envelope containing the original check rested untouched on the desk, for the first time that day. The money no longer mattered. What frightened her was realizing that a stranger, or perhaps someone she knew, had been quietly collecting pieces of her identity for weeks. A short time later, 2 uniformed officers arrived to take her statement. After reviewing the bank's initial fraud report, Detective Sarah Bennett from the Financial Crimes Unit joined them. She listened without interrupting while Emily described everything that had happened. The birthday celebration, the locked study, the slap, and Ethan's desperate demand for the original check. When Emily finished, Detective Bennett remained silent for a moment. Then she looked toward Richard. "Has anyone regularly helped you organize financial paperwork or personal documents?" Richard sighed heavily. "I've never been very comfortable with computers," he admitted. "My grandson often helped me sort through bills and banking paperwork whenever something confused me." Emily slowly turned toward her grandfather. "You mean Ethan?" Richard nodded. "He always said he was saving me from making expensive mistakes." The detective made a few notes but offered no conclusions. "At this stage," she said calmly, "we're looking at everyone who may have had legitimate access to financial information. It's important that we follow the evidence wherever it leads." Richard leaned back in his chair. His shoulders seemed heavier than they had only an hour earlier. "I trusted him," he whispered. No one answered. Some truths didn't need a response. Detective Bennett instructed the bank to preserve the account application, login history, surveillance footage, and all digital records before anything could be altered. The investigation had officially begun. Emily noticed her grandfather staring at his own hands. They weren't shaking because of the missing money. They were shaking because trust suddenly felt like a mistake. For the first time, Emily realized this wasn't simply financial fraud. Someone had patiently earned the family's confidence before trying to steal far more than money. Just as Detective Bennett closed her notebook, Emily's phone vibrated. A single message appeared from an unknown number. "You should have walked away." Emily looked at the screen, then silently wondered, who already knew she was at the bank? 3 days passed without a single message from Ethan. The silence felt deliberate. Detective Sarah Bennett warned Emily not to mistake silence for surrender. "People who lose control often stop talking," she said. "Then they make one risky move." She was right. Just after sunrise on the 4th day, Richard's home security app sent an alert. Someone had tried to unlock the back door using an old keypad code. The attempt failed. 10 minutes later, another alert appeared. This time, the motion sensor inside the detached garage activated. By the time officers arrived, whoever had entered was gone. Nothing valuable seemed to be missing. At first, Richard walked slowly around the garage, checking shelves that hadn't been touched in years. Then he frowned. The blue toolbox. Emily looked at the empty space. "It was here yesterday." Richard nodded. "It wasn't valuable. Just old paperwork and receipts from properties I sold years ago." Detective Bennett's eyes narrowed. If someone came here in the middle of the night for old paperwork... She paused. They weren't looking for money. They were looking for information. Crime scene technicians dusted the workbench for fingerprints while officers searched the nearby alley. An hour later, one technician approached the detective. "We found fresh tire marks behind the garage. The tracks led to a service road covered by a city traffic camera." Sarah immediately requested the footage. By late afternoon, the video arrived. The image wasn't perfect, but it showed a dark SUV stopping behind Richard's property just before dawn. A man stepped out wearing a hood. When he lifted the toolbox into the vehicle, the porch light briefly illuminated his face. Emily's heart sank. It was Ethan. Not because she wanted to believe it, because she couldn't deny it anymore. Sarah remained calm. "This gives us more than suspicion," she said. "Now we know he's trying to recover something." "But what?" Emily asked. "That's what he's afraid we'll find." Hours later, forensic officers opened the recovered traffic footage frame by frame. One detail stood out. A folded receipt had slipped from the toolbox while it was being carried away. The paper landed on the driveway. The thief never noticed. Richard picked it up earlier, assuming it was an old hardware receipt. It wasn't. It was a storage rental invoice. The unit number had been handwritten across the top. Sarah smiled for the first time that day. "Sometimes," she said, "people hide evidence so carefully, they forget to hide the map leading back to it." Within an hour, investigators obtained a search warrant. They didn't rush in. They waited until surveillance confirmed someone had entered the storage facility. Just before sunset, officers surrounded the building. Emily wasn't allowed inside. She remained in an unmarked vehicle with Richard. Neither spoke. Every passing minute felt longer than the last. Finally, Sarah emerged from the building carrying a sealed evidence container. Richard searched her face. She gave a small nod. "We found what he went back for." Inside the storage unit were financial ledgers, copied identification documents, disposable phones, and a laptop hidden beneath camping equipment. It wasn't enough to prove every crime, but it connected pieces that had never fit together before. Emily closed her eyes. For days she had wondered if her family could ever recover. Now she understood. Healing wouldn't begin when the truth was discovered. It would begin when the lies finally stopped. Digital specialists immediately secured the laptop and phones while investigators photographed every item before removing it. The evidence chain remained intact. No shortcuts, no assumptions. Richard quietly rubbed the faded wedding ring he still wore. He wasn't thinking about the missing money. He was remembering the grandson who used to help him organize that very garage. The hardest betrayals weren't committed by strangers. They were committed by people who already knew where every lock was. As officers prepared to leave the storage facility, one detective called Sarah back. "There's one more thing." Taped beneath a shelf was a sealed envelope addressed in Ethan's handwriting. Across the front were 5 chilling words. "Open only if I'm caught." The contents of the storage unit kept investigators busy for weeks. Every document was cataloged. Every electronic device was examined. Every financial record was traced. Piece by piece, the truth became impossible to ignore. The evidence revealed that Ethan had spent months creating false identities, moving money through temporary accounts, and collecting personal information from people who trusted him. Not every plan had succeeded, but enough had. Detective Sarah Bennett called Emily and Richard back to the station one quiet afternoon. "The district attorney has approved the charges," she said. "There won't be an arrest warrant based on assumptions. It'll be based on evidence." Richard slowly nodded. He didn't celebrate. He simply looked tired. "I kept asking myself where I failed," he admitted. Sarah answered gently. "You didn't fail. You were deceived." Those words stayed with him. 3 days later, Ethan surrendered through his attorney. He didn't arrive in handcuffs. He walked into the courthouse wearing the same confidence he had always shown the world. But confidence wasn't evidence. Inside the courtroom, investigators presented the financial records, digital files recovered from the storage unit, surveillance footage, and witness statements. For the first time, Ethan stopped trying to explain everything away. Emily watched quietly from the gallery. She realized she no longer needed an apology. She needed peace. Months later, the case came to an end. Some money was recovered. Some was gone forever. Richard sold a small investment property, not because he had to, but because he wanted a simpler life. He told Emily he was done measuring success by what he owned. He wanted to spend the years ahead with the people who had earned his trust. Emily finally opened the restoration studio she had dreamed about for years. On opening day, Richard arrived carrying an old wooden toolbox. It was scratched, worn, and decades old. "I thought you could give this a second life," he said with a smile. Emily placed it on a shelf near the entrance. It became the first item every customer noticed. Not because it was beautiful, because it reminded her that broken things didn't always have to be thrown away. Some could be repaired. Others had to be left behind. As evening settled outside the studio, Emily locked the front door after her first successful day in business. For the first time in months, she felt something unfamiliar. Relief. Richard paused before leaving and looked back through the front window. Emily was smiling while arranging her tools. It was the first genuine smile he had seen from her since her birthday. Justice didn't erase the past. It simply gave the future a chance to begin. Emily later framed a handwritten note behind the workshop counter. It read, "Trust is a gift. Protect it, but never let fear decide who deserves it." She smiled each time she read it, not because she had forgotten, because she had finally moved forward. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. Sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't getting revenge, it's choosing honesty, setting healthy boundaries, and refusing to let someone else's choices control your future. If this story made you think, let me know in the comments. What would you have done if you were in Emily's position? Could you ever trust someone again after a betrayal like this? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Until next time, take care of yourself, protect the people who truly value you, and remember, real strength isn't found in holding on to the past. It's found in having the courage to move forward.